save from the odd moan of the outdated HVAC system and the hum of the fluorescent lights. Since she wasn't much for conversation at night and something about the store after hours made her uncomfortable, Ella was already at the register, chewing gum and browsing through her phone. I used to make fun of her for being a little dark. Then came Mr. Callahan, our manager. He was a gruff man in his late 50s who always looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. He gave me the task list as usual, which included restocking aisle 7, cleaning the candy aisle shelves, and checking the inventory in the back. He grunted without saying much. Lila would always roll her eyes and mutter something about negative vibes. By 9:30, they vanished inside the office. The first strange thing I saw was a box of mop heads lying in the middle of the aisle. I swear it wasn't there when I started. I'd cleaned the area to make room for the refill LLA. I was knee-deep in arranging mops and cleaning supplies. Her voice bounced back from the front when I cried out, "What do you mess with the mop heads? Why the... Would I do that?" She responded fairly. By 10 p.m., I pushed the box back, onto the shelf and continued, ignoring the shiver of anxiety that was starting to run up my spine. Callahan was not present. To be observed. Usually, he would pretend to complete paperwork or loiter around the office monitoring the surveillance cameras, but tonight the office was dark and the door was shut. "Where is Callahan?" When I asked Lila, she shrugged and didn't raise her phone. Though strange, he occasionally sneaked out for a smoke in the back alley. I assumed he was just venting because I had been refilling candy on aisle 3 when Lila called out again. "I hadn't seen him since he gave you the list. Did you hear her turn the corner, Ethan?" Her face was pale, and something fell in the back, like a loud noise. We both turned to face W, the stockroom, where the door was slightly open and the dim light from the overhead spilled into the store. The door should have been closed and locked at all times, so I told Ethan to stay put. As I headed toward the stockroom, she shot back, clinging close to me. At first glance, everything appeared normal, with shelves piled high with merchandise and a few empty boxes strewn about. But then I noticed a clipboard on the floor in the far corner. It was Callahan's Callahan. My voice reverberated back to me when I cried out. But there was no response. "What the is he doing?" Clutching her phone like a lifeline, Lila whispered. I noticed something strange when I picked up the clipboard. One of the pages had been pulled off, leaving jagged edges. "Let's examine the cameras." I mentioned that the tiny display in the back wasn't very good. It had shaky black and white video that flickered every few seconds. The recording went to about 9:45. The last time I saw Callahan, he was carrying his clipboard into aisle 5 when he paused and looked down at something. The video then glitched for a second or two, and when it cleared, he was gone. "What the hell?" Leaning closer, Lila whispered. I rewound it frame by frame, and the same thing happened. 1 second he was there, the next he wasn't. "That's not possible," I mumbled, and she took hold of my arm. "I don't know where Ethan is, but this isn't amusing." Before I could say anything more, there was a huge blast coming from the stockroom. She shot back, but I couldn't ignore it. "This," Ella remarked, "I'm backing away, we need to check it out." I exclaimed, "You're out of your damn mind." Even though my legs felt like jelly, there was a problem. Rear in the stockroom, a pair of metal shells along the rear wall had made a commotion. One of them had fallen over, spilling boxes all over the floor. Behind it, in the darkness, was a door I had never seen before. Lila asked, her voice shaking, "What the is?" I mentioned that the door was made of ancient metal and had corroded around the edges. It had a keyhole instead of a handle. But the strangest thing was that the air around it was freezing, not that it was November. I said, "Callahan must have gone down there." Lila looked at me as if I had gone crazy. "You genuinely believe that he entered a spooky basement?" "Even know where it leads," but before I could react, there was a voice that was hardly audible. "Could you please help me?" Lila's eyes grew wide. "We're contacting the police, Ethan." I nodded because, for once, I wasn't going to argue with the officer. Approximately 20 minutes later, Daniels and his companion arrived. Daniels was a straightforward man in his 40s who had a gravelly voice and a perpetual frown. We told everything about Callahan's disappearance, and Ramirez appeared, brand new after leaving the academy, still eager and wide-eyed. The rumbling in the stockroom and the strange footage. Though he didn't appear persuaded, Daniels took the matter seriously enough to verify that the basement door wasn't in the drawings. He mumbled as he ran his flashlight over the frame. Before yanking the door open, I radioed for help. A tiny staircase led down into the darkness, and the chilly air hit us like a wave. "You two, stay here." Daniels gave the instruction. "Not a chance." Daniels frowned at her, but Lila said she didn't move, so it was okay to stay behind us and not touch anything. The stairway led to a vast, unfinished chamber with walls covered with bizarre symbols and sentences that seemed to fit in a cult. And a leather-bound book and a table covered with dusty papers were located in the middle of the space. Daniels muttered a cuss, wondering what the yas is this place. Rear picked up one of the papers, which appeared to be diary entries discussing ceremonies, and he paled as he read what I had pressed as sacrifices. He claimed that when we noticed something moving in the room's far corner and a shadow that shouldn't have been there freeze, my stomach churned. I don't remember much after Daniels yelled and pulled out his gun, but the shadow continued to grow and there were bullets reverberating throughout the cramped room. Daniels and Ramirez stayed behind to secure the scene, but we didn't stay to see what happened. The following day, the store was closed officially and they unofficially called it a gas leak. I don't think anyone wanted to admit what they found down there, and as for Callahan, he was never found, sometimes late at night, I believe I heard. Lila was screaming. Ramirez was shouting for backup, but somehow we managed to escape. His voice, or perhaps it's just in my head, but I will never go back to that. It was a typical Thursday night when things took a turn for the worse. I was working the late shift, which is a shift where the store is almost empty. Just me and a few straggling shoppers drifting down the aisles. I had worked at the Dollar Tree for almost 3 years, long enough to get used to the quiet, sometimes eerie stillness. People always said that it was the kind of job where you could zone out and just do your work, but that wasn't the case. There was always something in the air at night that I couldn't shake. Perhaps it was the flickering lights or the way the aisles seemed to go on forever. To understand the place's rhythm, but that particular night something felt off. Initially, it was simply a sound. As I returned to stocking the shelves, I couldn't help but notice the faint tapping on the tiles, which sounded like someone shuffling their feet down the aisles. I thought I was tired, but it could have been hell because I hadn't slept much lately. I looked over my shoulder and saw nothing but empty aisles, but the sound returned, louder this time. I dismissed it, assuming it was simply the wind or perhaps the sound of boxes shifting on a shelf. I knew that no one should be here because my coworker had left for home hours before. But the tapping kept growing closer and closer until it felt like someone was breathing down my neck from directly behind me. My hands were sweaty, and my heart was racing. I was working and trying to concentrate when I noticed a tall, blurry shadow standing at the far end of the aisle. I couldn't make out any details, but I felt like someone was drawing me in. I blinked, and it vanished. I told myself it was nothing, maybe I was just seeing things, but I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something wasn't right. The tapping continued, but this time it was different, purposeful, and a warning. A chilly voice in my head said, "Don't look back." But I did, of course, and there it was, standing a few steps behind me, getting closer and closer. Nearly distinguish its features, long, pale fingers, eyes that are hollow. My blood froze. The store was oppressive, and the shadows seemed to shift as if they were closing in on me. I froze, unable to move or scream. After a brief flash of light, everything became dark. I stood there, breathing shallowly and trying to get used to the utter silence. The air felt heavy and oppressive, and even though I couldn't see it, I could feel the presence getting closer. Then I heard a whisper, "You're not leaving," and I froze. I turned to grab my phone, but it wasn't there. I felt panic strike me like a kick to the stomach. It had slid out while I struggled with my hands, shivering in my pockets. My body went cold, like ice was running through my veins, and I staggered toward the entrance, backing up in desperation to get out, but every step I took made the aisles seem longer and longer, as if the store was playing with me and trapping me. I turned around, searching for a way out, but this time the whisper was louder and said, You belong to the store. The store had turned into a maze, with the shelves, aisles, and signage all twisted and bent. I couldn't tell which way was out anymore. But as I turned around again, I saw the figure, but it wasn't by itself. I couldn't breathe because of the walls closing in on me and the whispers getting louder. This is where you belong. And I couldn't believe I unable to move everything. Wasn't right. I forced myself to keep going even though my feet felt like they were stuck in concrete, and each step was slower than the last, as if I were walking through molasses. My body and mind felt strange, and I turned into another aisle that looked familiar but was filled with strange dolls with eyes that seemed to follow me. The aisles and shelves were too tall and narrow, making it feel like I wasn't in the Dollar Tree anymore. Old dust-covered picture frames with worn book covers that made it impossible to see the titles, and then the tapping got louder. I didn't want to look, but something compelled me to. I kept my eyes forward, but when I turned, I saw that it was no longer human. Its eyes were hollow, its skin was ashen, and with every breath I took, I felt a presence that made my skin crawl. My body was frozen and my mind screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then the whisper came again, but this time it wasn't even from the figure. It was all over the walls and the aisles, and this is where you belong. I tried to scream, but my voice died in my throat, and the air thickened around me as if it were choking me. The pressure in my chest felt like something heavy and dark was taking root inside of me. I was unable to flee or run because the aisles had changed again. The shelves were too high and the floor felt like it was shifting beneath my feet. It was a nightmare, but it was real. I turned again to find an escape, but every path I took me deeper into the darkness, and the tapping got closer and closer, until I felt like someone was breathing directly down my neck. I spun around, but there were only shadows, and then I saw the other shoppers standing motionless and frozen. They looked at me vacantly, their eyes hollow like the figure's mouth slightly open. Unaware, but they were present, I weakened the store by backing up my legs. The individuals. The whispers were too much for me to handle, and I wasn't sure if I was going insane or if I was actually stuck in a warped version of reality when it came again, straight in my ear. You're a part of it now, and you can't go. I turned around, but the only people there were the store and myself. I was no longer just the girl working the late shift. I was now a member of something more sinister, and I secretly knew that I would never leave. It's not particularly exciting to work the night shift at Dollar Tree, but I've become used to it. The store almost feels like most nights are uneventful, restocking shelves, assisting the occasional late-night customer, and chatting with my coworker Lisa if she's around. However, things changed when he started showing up about 3 months ago. He wasn't like the typical customers who came in looking for cheap snacks or last-minute party supplies. Now, it feels like a second home with its quiet aisles and the familiar hum of the fluorescent lights. This middle-aged man with a beige jacket seemed uninterested in making any purchases. He would enter, browse the aisles, and then depart without saying anything. At first I assumed he might be homeless or searching for a certain item that he couldn't locate, but he returned every night, so I didn't give it much attention. Although everyone has their peculiarities and some individuals prefer to browse, there was something strange about he moved with a slow, deliberate rhythm as if he wasn't really there, and no matter what, he always ended up in aisle 7. One night, while I was replenishing cleaning supplies, I noticed him standing motionless in aisle 7, staring at the sponges without touching them. This continued for so long that I began to feel uneasy. "Can I help you find something?" I asked in a steady, light voice, and he turned his head slightly, but he didn't look at me. "I just need to find something," he said so softly that I hardly heard him. Before I could ask him anything else, he turned and left the store the following day. I watched the security footage to see if he had done anything strange. The cameras weren't the best quality, but I could see him enter the store, go straight to aisle 7, and stand there for a few minutes before leaving. What caught my attention, though, was how the footage kept glitching. Every time he moved, the screen would flicker, freezing for a second before continuing. When he left the store, the camera froze completely, and when it started again, he was gone. I watched the footage 3 more times, but it didn't change that night. I couldn't stop thinking about the man and the glitches. It seemed like there was a connection, something I was missing during my shift. I kept a close eye on aisle 7 and at one point I noticed a sponge on the floor, which was odd because I had just cleaned that aisle. The following day, while we were organizing stock, I casually mentioned the man to Lisa. "You mean the guy in the beige jacket?" she said in an uneasy tone. "Yeah, I've seen him a few times. He's weird, never buys anything, just stands there." I nodded. "He's always been around." I was positive it hadn't been there before, but when I picked it up, a chill went through me. It wasn't cold or wet, but something about it felt off. He was a wonderful gentleman who worked here before you began, but one day he just stopped showing up. The management said he probably quit, but no one ever heard from him. Lisa hesitated, but not always. Jay Marsh reminded me of him. Once more, what transpired before to his disappearance? When I asked Lisa, she looked toward aisle 7 and lowered her voice. He seemed to be obsessed with it, spending a lot of time there in that aisle. That night I decided to look around the back room to see if Jay Marsh had left anything behind. After going through dusty boxes and piles of old paperwork, I discovered a small worn notebook tucked behind a shelf. The pages were filled with frantic handwriting, some of which was barely readable, and the same sentence kept coming up. "He's searching for what's gone. Don't follow him." As I read it, I felt a shiver. The following night, I was drawn to aisle 7 once more, and when I ran my hand along the wall behind the shelves, I noticed a small gap. I felt the wall shift between two panels pressing against it, and when I stepped inside the narrow passageway which led to a small dark room no larger than a closet, I saw dusty shelves, a chair, and a single hanging light bulb on one of the shelves. I found another notebook, and this time the handwriting was the same, but it was more detailed, describing sightings of a man in a beige jacket, his frequent visits to aisle 7, and his obsession with finding something. One line in particular stood out. "He's not just looking for something, he's looking for someone." A few nights later I saw him again, and I decided to confront him this time while he was staring at the same shelf in aisle 7. I asked him firmly, "What are you looking for?" He turned slowly, his expression enigmatic, and replied, "It's not here anymore." I remarked gently, "Why do you keep coming back?" I asked, "Why do you keep returning?" When I pressed, he didn't respond. Instead, he turned and headed for the exit. Against my better judgment, I followed him, but as he got to the door, he stopped and turned to face me. His eyes were filled with an odd sadness, and he said, "You shouldn't have followed me." Then, just like in the video, he disappeared, and I never saw him again. One evening, while cleaning the back room, I discovered a folded piece of paper tucked between some boxes. It wasn't dusty as if someone had just put it there, but it said, "Thank you, I found what I lost." I stood there for a while, staring at the words, and eventually life at Dollar Tree returned to normal. A pregnant woman named Claire began working the night shift with us shortly after the man vanished. She had been through a lot and was quiet, keeping to herself. But Lisa and I stopped talking about the man, even though we both avoided aisle 7 unless it was absolutely necessary. Every now and then I feel a slight chill when I pass that spot, like a shadow brushing against me. She frequently spoke about feeling uneasy near aisle 7, yet she seemed to have a peculiar connection to the store. One night she stated, "I don't know why, but I feel like something's been waiting for me here, something familiar." Lisa and I looked at each other, but Claire never gave any details. She soon vanished as well, leaving only a note that was identical to the one I had found saying, "Thank you. I found what I lost." I have no idea who or what the man in the beige jacket was, or why Claire was pregnant. But with so much to look forward to, certain mysteries aren't meant to be. Lily and Mark had taken night shifts in the little Pennsylvania town, so their move wasn't intended to last forever. The Dollar Tree, because, although it's not ideal, it was realistic, offered flexible hours, solid salary, and enough time throughout the day to work on their goal of saving for a home. When signing the contract, Mark stated that it was only temporary. The store itself was old, with a slight mildew odor in the air, narrow aisles, shelves full of inexpensive trinkets and necessities, and a constant hum of fluorescent lights. During the graveyard shift, the place seemed to be stuck in a strange kind of limbo, too quiet yet always uncannily alive. Lily grinned as she ran her fingers over the edge of the paper. It's fine as long as we're together. While Mark managed the stockroom, Lily was tasked with storing groceries, canned products, and snacks. Delivery. It was during her second shift that Lily first heard a faint but deliberate rhythmic tapping that seemed to come from the far end of the store, near the back aisles where clearance items were kept. The first night felt uneventful, but she couldn't get rid of the strange feeling that she was being watched. She froze mid-step, clutching a box of crackers. "Do you hear what she said into her walkie-talkie, Mark?" He said. "It's coming from the back. Probably rats." And his voice crackled through the tapping sound. "Stock rooms always have them." He continued casually. Lily groaned. "Ignore that. It's disgusting." Mark continued. The tapping continued across the aisles, getting progressively softer as she moved away and louder when she returned to the grocery department. By the conclusion of her shift, her nerves were strained as the days went by. But it's probably nothing. The tapping constantly came from the same spot, aisle 6, and Lily couldn't help but notice how odd it was. "Why do I find myself in the eerie aisles every time?" During their journey home one morning, she whispered to Mark, "Maybe you get haunted." He taunted her by making ghostly motions with his hands, and she rolled her eyes, but she couldn't get rid of the uneasiness. "It's not funny. I'm serious. Something feels off," she said. "It's an old building pipes." The shift of creaking flooring. You're simply allowing your imagination to run wild. But hers was unable to account for the faint by the third week of her leave. She started to hear whispers. Late one night, as she bent to refill soup cans, she heard a voice hiss. Her heart raced, but there was no response, just the soft hum of the overhead lights. That night, Lily dreamed of a pale, gaunt woman with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce the darkness. She was wearing a nurse's uniform, and her hands were stained red. The woman whispered in the dream as she stood at the end of an aisle. Before it was too late, Lily woke up and noticed faint red marks on her neck. The following morning, she pulled her hair back to show him, and he scowled. "How did that happen? I don't know, it wasn't there when I went to bed." "Are you sure you didn't scratch yourself?" she yelled. Sharper than expected, ER. "Perhaps it's tension. You've been tense ever since we started this job," Mark moaned. Lily scowled at him, unable to get rid of her uneasiness. "This isn't tension. Something's wrong with that place." Before it was a Dollar Tree, the building had been a small hospital called St. Agnes Memorial, which closed in the 1960s due to a flurry of malpractice lawsuits alleging abuse, unlicensed surgeries, and unexplained patient deaths. Lily spent her day off learning about the store's history, and what she discovered chilled her, damaged its reputation. Throughout her inquiry, the name Clara Hill kept coming up. She had been the hospital's top nurse in its last years, and was notorious for her strict techniques and fixation on reproductive treatments. "Clara is in my dreams because of accusations that she conducted covert tests on expectant mothers, many of whom lost their unborn children." Back at work, Lily muttered to herself that she was feeling queasy because of the bizarre events that escalated, such as objects falling from shelves in aisle 6. One night while refilling candies, the temperature dropped suddenly, and shadows moved in her peripheral vision, but when she turned, nothing was there. With her hollow eyes glaring, Lily looked up at the surveillance mirror behind her and saw Clara's reflection. Lily let out a scream. Mark ran over, his face pale. After, she dropped a box of chocolate bars and spun around the aisle, which was empty. "Clara, Lily, you're really frightening me." Lily faltered in the mirror before snapping, "I'm scared." The breaking point came a week later when the store was eerily silent, the kind of quiet that felt heavy. Mark hesitated before confessing that he had been hearing voices and that the other night I thought I saw someone in the stockroom, but when I checked, no one was there. "You knew something was wrong and you didn't tell me because I didn't want to freak you out." When the lights flickered and went out entirely, Lily was on aisle 6. She yelled while fumbling, "Mark," for her flashlight. He called, "And I'm here." His light beam pierced the darkness as he hurried toward her, and the tapping became louder, resembling footsteps that were now reverberating throughout the store, until Clara emerged, her translucent figure floating at the far end of the aisle. "Your child is mine," he said. Clara's voice was like nails on glass as she hissed. Clara ran at Lily with her skeletal hands spread as the shelves started to shake violently and goods fell to the floor. Lily gripped her tummy, tears flowing down her face, saying, "No, you can't have my baby." Mark took a metal bar off a shelf close by and swung it into Clara's body. It went through without incident, although the force seemed to disturb her. "I'm not scared of you. You lost your child and I'm sorry, but you're not taking mine," Lily cried out. Before disappearing into a frigid mist the following morning, Lily and Mark quit their employment and packed their belongings and drove out of town. Lily looked in the rearview mirror and saw Clara's weak but distinct reflection, which could be seen for miles. Clara gave off an ear-piercing roar. The whispers pursued her, becoming louder every night, and she came to the realization that some things could never really be. It was the type of night when you knew something wasn't right but couldn't quite put your finger on it. I was dragging myself through the motions, hardly conscious, following a demanding work week filled with mounting debts and that persistent fatigue that comes in waves. My main thought was to finish my shift at Dollar Tree and leave as soon as possible, because I didn't want to be there any longer than necessary. My shift began at 10 p.m. I could get some rest before tackling more of life's challenges because the store would close at 2 a.m. The Dollar Tree was a modest, peaceful spot where primarily at night customers arrived to pick up a few last-minute necessities. The place was usually dead quiet after midnight and remained that way for the most part, but tonight something felt off. The air felt thicker and heavier, almost suffocating, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, even though I had no idea what. I clocked in and tied my apron around my waist before making my way into the main aisle, which was mostly empty save for a few sporadic customers. Nothing serious ever happened there, though you might occasionally run into the odd drunk trying to smuggle in a few extra bucks at the self-checkout. 2 adolescents searching for food, an elderly woman carrying a basket filled with miscellaneous items, a man perusing the cleaning materials. It wasn't like it was the first time I'd worked late shifts at a retail job. I'd been doing it for years, but tonight was different. Perhaps I was just too tired, or perhaps I was just being paranoid. I'd been up late working overtime and barely slept the last few days, and I was running on coffee and sheer willpower. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering a little like they were about to give up on life, and the air conditioner's dull hum was louder than usual. Beans and soup returned to its original position. I tried to keep myself occupied and prevent the thoughts from creeping in, but I couldn't help it. The store felt dead. Not empty, but dead in a quiet sense, with no beeps from the self-checkouts, no sounds of customers conversing, just the steady hum of the freezer section and the occasional shuffling of feet on the linoleum. At first, I didn't give it much thought. Perhaps it was just another customer strolling around, but then I heard footsteps approaching slowly, as if the person taking their sweet time, allowing each step to reverberating in the quiet. I looked over my shoulder without moving my entire body, but since it was a quiet night and nobody was there, I assumed it was simply the wind. Perhaps the air conditioner was playing tricks on me, causing the echo, but then it happened again. This time the footsteps were even closer, almost directly behind me, and my heart began to race. I stopped stacking cans and quickly turned around, but once more there was nobody there, and I could feel the perspiration beginning to form on the back of my neck. I tried to convince myself that it was nothing, that I was simply exhausted, but there it was again, those footsteps approaching as if someone was waiting behind me. I took a deep breath to calm myself, but the uneasiness only increased. I looked down the aisle again, scanning it, and it was still empty. I made the decision to leave the aisle and take a break after trying to shake it off, but the sensation persisted, as though someone or something was standing right behind me and breathing down my neck. I thought I might go check on the stock room or get some cleaning supplies from the back, but as I turned to leave, I noticed a shopping cart sitting at the far end of the aisle. The problem was that, when I had passed through this aisle earlier, I was positive there was no cart there, so I stopped dead in my tracks and stared at the cart. My heart skipped a beat, and there was no one nearby. I shook my head, trying to convince myself that I was just weary. I hurried past the cart while keeping my head down, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was watching me. I reached the back of the store and picked up the cleaning supplies, but the uneasy feeling persisted like a foul odor, making every move feel like a potential threat. When I first noticed him, I assumed he was just another strange client who had come in late at night. But there was something strange about the man who was standing at the end of one of the aisles, staring at me. I had to return to the front of the store to finish my shift and leave. Although most of his face was hidden by shadows, his eyes were focused on me, and he remained silent. Nothing moved. I had been working at Dollar Tree for months and knew all of the regular customers, but this guy had never seen him before. I froze, my heart began to race, my palms began to perspire, and I was at a loss for what to do. I called out, trying to sound casual, but my voice came out shaky, almost like a whisper. The guy just stood there watching me as if he could see right through me. I retreated a step in an attempt to conceal the fact that my heart was thumping. In my ears and my chest felt constricted. I tried again, forcing the words out, but nothing moved or responded, just the man standing there. "Can I help you find something?" Watching me like a predator in the dark. I knew I should have called for help, but I didn't because of something about him. He seemed to be waiting for me to move, and I felt stuck there, my feet firmly planted on the ground, my head yelling for me to get out, but I was immobile. The man's eyes remained fixed on me as he stood there, and then, after what seemed like an eternity, I turned around and began to walk away. My steps were quick, but I kept my head down so I wouldn't have to look back. I just wanted to get out of that aisle, but I heard those slow, deliberate footsteps behind me approaching again, and I couldn't stop my legs from moving. I had to get to the break room, lock myself in, and call for help before my brain could catch up. But as I turned the corner to the back of the store, the footsteps continued to follow me. I looked over my shoulder for a moment and my stomach dropped. The man was standing a few feet behind me, his eyes fixed on mine without blinking. He wasn't running or in a rush. He just walked slowly and deliberately, as if he had always been there, but I could feel his approach. My hands were shaking as I struggled for my phone in my pocket, trying to open it. My breath was shallow, and my chest was constricted. But every time I turned my head, he was immediately behind me. I was only a few feet away, and his eyes were fixed on me as if he was waiting for me to make a mistake. The voice wasn't his, but it was a warning in my head that I should leave before it was too late. I didn't question it, didn't stop to think, and just turned and ran toward the break room, but the door was locked, of course. My mind raced as I slammed my shoulder against it, but the damn thing wouldn't budge. I turned around, panicking, and heard him standing in front of me, obstructing my path. "Who are you?" I gasped, my voice trembling, barely a whisper. He didn't say anything. He just pointed toward the back of the store, toward the exit. Realized that I had no idea why he was there or what he wanted, but I had a feeling that I wouldn't survive if I didn't go, so I turned and raced for the rear exit. I was afraid to turn around and take another look.